Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, first time guest. Happy to have him to commiserate about a different high profile team in a major market that perhaps had a less than pleasant year. We're in the news together a little bit, so we'll get into all that. He is both a writer and a podcaster for Silver Screen and Roll, which of course is the Lakers blog on SB Nation. Jacob Brood, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Hey, not much. We're in the dog days of summer, so not a ton to talk about. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting year for the Lakers, and then a somehow even more interesting offseason.
Well, let's start. You know what? Let's start with the year because for me, when I think about the Lakers now, everything kind of leads back to Russ because I just find the story to be a fascinating one. And I will fully admit, as someone who has whose team that they follow has been the car accident many times over the last 20 years, as I travel down the roadway and I get to see another car accident, I'm like, oh, look, that's not us. I'm going to look over there. So I'll go back just like a year ago and I'll ask you, like, when you guys got Russ, like, what was your thinking at that time? Were you like for the move? Were you like, iffy?
It was mixed emotions. I didn't hate the move necessarily, and I could see a pathway for it working. I wasn't crazy about them trading as many kind of contributing pieces as they did, but the Lakers have really wanted this 3-star type of roster since Rob Pelinka's gotten there, really. So it kind of felt inevitable. So you kind of like talk yourself into it. Again, I thought there was a path to success that really never formulated. But I mean, you could talk yourself into it in LA because it was his hometown, and he spent the whole kind of lead up to the season and whatnot, talking about how he watched the Lakers parades in the early 2000s with Shaq and Kobe. He skipped out on school to go watch the parade. So it was pretty easy as Lakers fans to kind of talk yourself into this could be a really fun year and this could work. What we got was neither fun nor something that worked.
Listen, man, we were not raising banners, but I still remember vividly when the Kemba news dropped, and I was like, all right. I think I wrote a piece that day or the next day. Finally, we have a point guard. It was all gumdrops and candy canes for about 2 games. And then we lost to the Magic, and then the rest of the season ensued. Anyway, so things did not go according to plan with Russ. We don't have to talk about that anymore. So let's fast forward to the offseason, which you referenced already, which, by the way, I don't think we're going to spend too much time talking about it because I don't know if it's relevant to Knicks fans, but like, I thought you guys had a nice offseason in terms of just like the signings and whatnot. Were you pleased with what you guys did?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like they learned from the mistakes of last offseason where they signed a whole bunch of veterans and then they went 180 degrees the other way and signed a whole bunch of young guys. But the pieces seem to make sense. It filled some holes. It kind of goes with what Darvin Ham had been talking about, wanting to play a 4-out 1-in type of style. So the pieces made sense, and it's not a bunch of 35-year-olds that are going to be incapable of playing back to back. So I guess baby steps in that regard.
Yeah, I'm really I don't want to get off on a tangent. I'm curious to see how Lonnie Walker does, because he's a guy that I had like wondered who if someone was going to maybe take a chance on him with a significant payday, and you guys got him on the cheap. So I'm excited to see what he does. Anyway, I digress. So when the offseason started, which is, I guess now, I mean, Jesus, it's been a while, several months for both of us. What was your expectation, if any, as far as like they were going to try to move Russ, they would be successful, they would try and fail? Like, what was your mindset?
Yeah. I mean, starting with Russ's exit interview, it was pretty clear this was pretty much completely untenable.
What was? Could you just inform? Because I actually I vaguely remember it, but I don't remember specifics.
Yeah, he just threw everybody under the bus. He blamed Frank Vogel for various things, which at that point Vogel was already fired. He spoke about LeBron and AD not letting Russ be Russ. He spoke about the front office under the bus for. I honestly can't remember. I just remember sitting there watching him just blame everybody but himself for why the season was a failure. And he was asked, like, well, how do you feel you did? And he said, well, I didn't average a triple-double, so it wasn't a successful season.
Did he really say that?
Earnestly, 100% said that. So pretty much, I mean, day one of the Lakers offseason is the exit interview. So from day one, I was like, oh boy, he just burned every bridge and he ain't coming back. So it was, I worked under the expectation that he was not going to be coming back. And that's what the reports were pretty early on. But there have been so many teams and just kind of these waves of different types of trades that might be made and things of that nature that have come. But yeah, from the onset, I think everybody realized this was a mistake and it wasn't going to work no matter how injured the Lakers were last season. Even when they were healthy, it really wasn't something that showed a lot of promise, not enough to run it back. And so, yeah, I had worked under the assumption that from the exit interview that even Russ thought Russ wasn't coming back next season.
Wow, that I actually didn't realize it was that clear cut in terms of what he was saying. So just so you are aware of like where I'm coming from a Knicks perspective, and Andrew, maybe actually you should jump in here because correct me if I'm wrong. There were not rumors, but in terms of like a segment of the fan base, maybe even me at one point in time during a dark night in particular, that was like, hey, if they'll take Randall and Fournier for Russ, let's just do that and buy him out. Was that like pre-trade deadline where that people started talking about that?
That's a Bobby Marks thing that he put out into the world right before the trade deadline. Okay. And it was with the thought that the Knicks get their point guard. What it's evolved into now, and I'm sure you've heard this part of it, is that yes, Randall would be going back to the Lakers, and it would be draft compensation that the Lakers would be giving up to help in a Donovan Mitchell trade. Russ wouldn't play a game for any of the teams involved in said deal. That's what it's evolved to now.
I remember the Marks thing because I remember he went on Zach Lowe's podcast and was like, oh yeah, sell some tickets to Madison Square Garden. And then, oh yeah, by the way, the Knicks would like get a pick out of it. But I think even before that, there were some fans who were like, hey, let's do this. In any case,
there may or may not be a former Knick that hosts a podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network that also suggested. Shout out to Channing Frye came on our pod and
like, you guys should trade for Russ. Forget about any picks or anything. Just trade for Russ.
This will save the franchise, and we respectfully let him say things.
I don't know. I disagree. I think you guys should go for it. Save the franchise, no picks or anything.
So the reason I went down that little rabbit hole was I want to just let you know this has been the notion of this has been germinating in the fan base for a while, and now we've gotten to the point where obviously Mark Stein, I think, had the report a few days ago with that the Lakers. How did you interpret? Let me ask you that. How did you interpret that report? Because I interpreted it as like it was clear that the Knicks and Jazz were talking, and the Lakers were trying to maybe get in on it and see if they could benefit from it. Was that how you took it? Yeah,
I mean, the positive with Russ, it's kind of a positive with a kind of asterisk. He is an expiring contract, which has some value. He is just an enormous expiring contract. So it is really hard to just cobble together enough salaries to just make that work. And so I could see the value there for a team to trade for him like Utah, because he's this big expiring and they don't want long-term money. That's why I thought for some reasons it made sense for the Knicks. But Yeah, Utah's an odd one, and the package the Lakers were getting back, I don't know about it. It feels like it would be right now like a third option for the offseason. However, I don't know how viable any of the options really are, but
let's talk about them. What in your mind, what are the best or second best options?
Well, Kyrie is going to be the best option. It's still wild to me. I've said this a couple different times, but look at what they did on the court. Kyrie and Russ last season. It's wild that this even feels like it's somewhat possible, because Kyrie is still an incredible basketball player with a ton of baggage, but still an absolutely incredible player, and Russ is not. So the fact that the Lakers could go from Russ to Kyrie, even if it costs draft picks, is crazy to me. So I have that pretty clearly number one. And then I would say the Pacers
deal. I was going to ask you about the Pacers deal. Okay.
Yeah. So that
was Turner, Hield, and am I forgetting anybody?
No, it would be some variation of Miles Turner, Buddy Hield for Russ, and most likely 2 first-round picks. That seems, I mean, right now the holdup in earnestly every kind of negotiation with the Lakers is that they do not want to include both first-round picks that they can, 2027 and 2029.
Can we stay on that for a second? Because again, from my perspective here in New York, I'm not out there, and I don't hear obviously anything that you're hearing. I had been unclear about whether it was the Lakers were like just didn't want to talk future draft picks at all, but now you're saying it's like if they could get a deal that they like kind of like the players coming back, they would do it for one of the picks, you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the picks has been on the table. The 2027, I believe, has been on the table in every discussion, but it's been Russ 2027 and a couple second rounders, because they're just adamant they don't want to include 2 first rounders. I mean, ultimately, kind of big picture, I think I would call their bluff, and I think it's the Lakers trying as long as they can to hold out and find a deal, because I don't think I don't think you can bring Russ back on the team next. But yeah, no, the Lakers have been open to trading draft picks. It's just they've drawn this hard line in the sand for right now that they don't want to include both first round draft picks. And that's what has stopped the Kyrie trade. That's what stopped the Buddy and Miles Turner trade so far, is an unwillingness to include both the first round draft picks they can.
But I'll just give my quick 2 cents. Not that anybody really cares what I think about what the Lakers should do, but like I understand that argument if we're talking about you guys getting whether it's Turner and Hield or fucking Julius Randle and Derrick Rose or Evan Fournier and Bogdanovic, whatever. Name any Jazz Pacer. You want to throw the Hornets in there? Like, they were talked about as a possible roster. Like, I get all that, and I say this with Kyrie Irving, as Andrew could tell you, my least favorite person in the NBA. Brilliant to the nth degree as a basketball player. I do not care for him. But we do our periodically our championship equity power rankings in terms of not how a team, what they're going to finish in the regular season or this and that, how likely are they to win the title? And if you guys got Kyrie, I would tell you right now, they would be, at least 6th, 7th maybe higher. I don't know. Maybe I'm downplaying it. So I don't know. I'm surprised if that's on the table that they wouldn't do that, but I guess they don't want to.
Yeah. That's why I ultimately think it is a negotiating stance right now, because there's really no deadline for doing this. Maybe by the start of training camp, but even then that's a month and a half away. Yeah. So there isn't really any urgency to do this. LeBron's extension could have been that if he played it a certain way, which it certainly doesn't seem like he is, since it's been about a week since he could have signed the extension, and there just isn't any reports whatsoever really about it.
I wanted to ask you about that too, because I'll ask you about it now. Do you think that there is hesitancy on his part if it's related to putting pressure on the organization to do something with this Russ thing?
Yeah, no, certainly. I I mean, LeBron's been someone throughout his career that has kind of used his contract situation to, I don't want to say hold a front office hostage necessarily, but force them to make win now moves and force them to remain competitive. So yeah, I certainly think that that's kind of what he's doing right now. They met on last Thursday when he first could have signed his extension, and the talks were positive and everything. And it's kind of an open dialogue moving forward. So I would imagine that it was communicated then that like, yeah, I'm interested, but you guys got to do something about Russ, and LeBron has, through reports, made it pretty clear he really wants Kyrie Irving. So I would imagine that he's kind of holding out, telling the Lakers, look, if you get Kyrie, I'm signing on the dotted line right now. So that's the only type of pressure the Lakers are working under, and LeBron hasn't really turned that up yet. He might as we get closer to the season if nothing has happened. But so far, LeBron has just kind of sat back, and it seems to be that there's this understanding that there's nothing, no need to rush this right now. There's also the fact there have been a lot of reports that the Nets want to deal Kevin Durant or deal with that situation first before going on to Kyrie. And Lord knows that took multiple more twists this week. So it's just kind of this situation where there's really no timeline, and we're not really certain where, I guess training camp is the deadline right now to maybe get this done. Like from our perspective because obviously we're dealing with the Donovan Mitchell thing over here. Like, I think at this point, most Knicks fans are like, okay, well, I guess training camp is like the next not official deadline, but like, unofficial deadline. And there's been, various reporting out there that maybe, that's when the pressure really gets on, when they're on the doorstep of training camp. But like, it's just, when you think about it and you think about how these are, and I don't know if I've actually openly like phrased it this way, but like when you consider Durant and LeBron, two of the, 3 or 4 preeminent power players in the league as far as like players, playing for, one is playing for the marquee franchise and the other is playing for a major franchise in a major market. And then you have the Knicks, another major franchise in a major market, who are tied up in all of this as well. And then you could throw in the Jazz and like a couple other teams who may get roped into this. But it does feel like there has to be a first domino, and I guess that's Durant. But I mean, who knows? I don't know. Yeah, and that's kind of been the thing, is that the reports have said the Nets want to deal with Durant first, but I have no idea what's going to come of that. And I don't think anyone does. Yeah, so it's okay. Like we want to deal with Durant first, and it's like, what does that entail? Because like, I don't know that there's going to be a conclusion to this before the season starts. So I don't know. The Lakers have a much more a sooner deadline than that. The Nets really, I would imagine, are in no hurry to deal Durant, but the Lakers are in a hurry ultimately to deal Russell Westbrook before training camp starts. So it's just kind of been this for the Lakers and Nets, this standoff since, I guess, the day free agency started is when Durant requested his trade, and it seemed like it was much more realistic for Kyrie to be a Laker. Since that day, that's just been the two sides kind of staring at each other, waiting for like you said, the first domino to fall, for somebody to make the first move. So I'm going to live in my fantasy world for a minute, and you're going to be forced to come with me. Durant and Josiah, they have more high tea in London, and they decide, you know what, let's Joe's like, see you, Sean, see you, Steve, have a good one. It's your franchise, KD. So KD, whatever, there's no KD trade, and thus there is no Kyrie trade imminently. Then as the Lakers, do you think, because here's the thing with the Donovan Mitchell thing is like, it's putting Julius Randle's season last year aside, which was not great. It's just too many guys on the court that would need the ball. So if they got Mitchell, it just makes so much sense to try to trade Randle, except this front office doesn't trade guys
at their lowest point in value, and they would look to try to trade him to someone that would value him. Do you think the Lakers would value Julius Randle? I understand that's a dicey question, but I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely love Julius Randle, and he was kind of the first Laker to start off that rebuilding era. Lakers fans absolutely love Julius Randle. Unfortunately, the Lakers fans do not run the front office, and the front office, they did not treat Julius Randle all that well on his way out. When he left Los Angeles, eventually went to New Orleans and whatnot. So that's always been, I don't know how much that matters. I mean, ultimately it's not really, it would not necessarily be his call. Like he may not have a choice and he would have to go to Los Angeles. I don't know. It certainly didn't seem like he left on good terms. Magic Johnson was in the front office at the time, so maybe the Lakers just scapegoat Magic and say that was all his doing, and certainly he had his mistakes along the way and whatnot. So maybe that plays a part in it, but it would be interesting to get a sense of how much the Lakers do value Julius Randle. It would be an interesting fit on the court.
That's what I could see it working, right? Yeah, because like Randle likes to. I mean, look, he's become obviously much more of a jump shooter the last few years, but last time he was with you guys and when he was with New Orleans, like he went to his office down low, and he had more looks at in the restricted area over those 2 years, last year with the Lakers and 1 year in New Orleans, than just about any player in basketball. So like, I know AD is not a floor spacer in the traditional sense, but like I could see there being enough room to operate, right?
Yeah, and they're both plenty good enough ball handlers as well that they can play on the perimeter. And Darvin Ham came in and spoke about wanting to play a more spread out, kind of 4 out, 1 in type of offense, and something similar to what they've done in Milwaukee. And so it would make sense in that front. You could either have AD or Randle kind of as the 1 in, and it could change from possession to possession even. So I could see there being a blueprint for it working. It'd be a bit of a clunky fit at times, maybe. I don't know, maybe against certain lineups if you could close with it. You would also, I mean, the holdup forever has been whether AD really wants to play center. He did bulk up last season and came into training camp with the expectation of playing center, and then Frank Vogel kind of zagged, and he really loved those 2 big lineups that, I mean, to his credit, won them a title, but then it resulted in AD being kind of bulked up as a center playing power forward, and that kind of ruined his jumper, and that's why it looked atrocious last year and whatnot. But I mean, ultimately, AD has expressed a willingness to play center when required. He certainly doesn't love it, but I mean, the Lakers also have a couple traditional centers on the roster as well. So I could see it. I could see where it would work. I just really, it's hard to answer how much the Lakers front office values Randle though, ultimately, because I mean, when they had the chance to even just keep him on as a restricted free agent, they just said no, which might have been them kind of letting him free and go to a team that he wanted and whatnot. But I mean, it didn't end on the greatest terms. So I don't know how much they value him.
I still remember, it was an afternoon when the news hit that they were just, I forget if they actually rescinded his call, whatever it was, when he became an unrestricted free agent. I was like, man, Julius Randle's like, he wasn't my cup of tea back then, but I was like, Julius Randle's good. Like, that's very strange.
They rescinded his qualifying offer and then immediately spent almost that amount, I think, or something right around there on Rajon Rondo. And we were like, oh dear God, what is happening? Now, ultimately, Rajon Rondo played a huge role in the Lakers playoffs, winning the title. So ultimately, like, Rondo kind of backed his way into becoming this fan favorite playoff Rondo. But yeah, in the moment, we're like I said, Lakers fans loved Randle. mean, the writing was on the wall that the Lakers probably weren't going to keep him, but you kind of hoped like maybe they can work out something. And then it came out. I remember as well one afternoon that, I mean, really back to back, it was the Lakers have rescinded Julius Randle's qualifying offer. The Lakers are signing Rajon Rondo to a 1-year deal. And it was like, oh boy, wow, we're really going in a certain direction here, aren't we?
Life comes at you fast. Yeah, I mean, so that was the biggest question I had for you. I guess the other part of it in my mind that's interesting is, like, I guess I should ask you about Evan Fournier. Do you have any interest? Like, Evan Fournier, I keep saying it until someone yells at me enough to stop. More 3-pointers than anyone in basketball after January 1st of last year. Good percentage, like not the highest degree of difficulty, but like not easy shots either. Like, do you think you guys would be interested in another, a kind of a shooter like that?
I mean, yeah, because we talked earlier about the Lakers offseason, which I ultimately do like, but they did not get shooting in the least bit. And I'm not even sure I could tell you who the Lakers' best. LeBron might be the Lakers' best 3-point shooter right now. So that the Lakers have said that they need to get shooting. Again, this is kind of steps away. They think they can get Buddy Hield for a non-Russ package if it came down to it. Eric Gordon is a name talked about a lot as a player that they could swap Talen Horton-Tucker for, something along those lines. So there are ways the Lakers have talked about needing shooting, but in that sense, yeah, I think they would like Evan Fournier, the player. The other kind of underlying issue, which I don't know how the Lakers have said they don't want to take back long-term contracts, which, like, good luck ever getting rid of Russ if that's the case. I think that, again, is them kind of bluffing right now, and that's what you would say when you want as much leverage as you can. But yeah, the Lakers don't have a ton of wings and don't have any sort of shooting, and that's two things that Evan Fournier is or does. So yeah, I think they would have interest in Fournier. I mean, there are guys that the Lakers have had interest in as well. Derrick Rose has been someone that oddly the Lakers front office has desired for like years and years. So I would assume, I just kind of assumed if there's ever a trade with the Knicks that Derrick Rose is going to be in it as well, because they've wanted him forever.
Yeah. I was going to bring up Rose, and then there's the guy who's actually in the report last week, which is Cam Reddish, who I'll be absolutely honest with you. Until you said the word wings, I was like, oh yeah, I should probably ask him about Cam, the guy who's been linked to the freaking Lakers since the trade deadline.
It was before that even. We were linked to him when he was in Atlanta. Again, another one this one I really don't understand. I get
Rose, to be clear, just so I want to make that clear. Derrick Rose is freaking awesome. When he's healthy, he has been essentially the best player on the Knicks. But Cam is still figuring out what it means to be Cam Reddish.
So I watched Duke. I remember when he came up with that team. Years ago, I was a Duke fan. I kind of stopped following college basketball. That was one of the last teams I watched. And I remember then just kind of how frustrating he was at Duke, and then comes to the NBA and kind of has continued that. But throughout almost like really since the draft, kind of the pre-draft part of I can't remember what year he was in the draft, but
3 years ago. So he's entering his fourth season. Yeah. Yeah.
So the Lakers had talked to him then, and they've always liked him. They talked with Atlanta, I think a couple times, but certainly before he was dealt to the Knicks, they had tried to trade for him at Atlanta. And then there was the trade at the deadline that potentially was discussed with Toronto and whatnot. And then his name came up back again last week, as you said. So, yeah, the two names I would be almost certain would be in the trade would be Derrick Rose and Cam Reddish. I don't know what that brings it to money-wise, but you can kind of build out the rest from there. But, yeah, there are names the Lakers have liked on the Knicks, and which is why I think there is a path to a trade there. But, yeah, those two, for whatever reason, have been less so Derrick Rose, but have been guys the Lakers have wanted for a while.
I mean, it was a cup of coffee, but Rose did play with LeBron, briefly for that stint in Cleveland. I think at that point, I think Rose was still transitioning. That's rude. Figuring out what it meant to be Derrick Rose post, all of the injuries. And then it really kind of clicked for him in Minnesota. And then obviously, again, when he's been on the court, I can't say a bad thing about Derrick Rose this time around. So, let's wrap up with this. There are a lot of names, I think, of players that currently play in New York that in some way, shape, or form would make sense on the Lakers. And then you have the Jazz, who we know what Danny Ainge wants. He wants picks. He wants distant picks. He wants distant picks from a team that he thinks might suck when those picks convey. That's why I think he's dying to do a deal with the Knicks. And that's why I think he would value the hell out of whether it's 27, a 28 swap or whatever. Like, there's so much there that it makes sense to me that there's a deal here to be made. And I know they say like the more teams you get involved in a trade, the more complicated it is, less likely it is happening. It's why most trades are just two teams. I get that, but there just seems to be a lot there. And the other part of it, and this is what I kind of want to finish up with, is like, what is, I guess we went through plan A, B, C. What is plan D with, do they John Wall him? Do they buy him? Like, I literally just have no idea. Is there a plan D?
Yeah. Well, it seems like there is now, because the agent he recently hired is Jeff Schwartz, who is the buyout mastermind.
Kemba Walker, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say he's negotiated a couple buyouts for Kemba Walker, Andre Drummond. I don't have the full list in front of me. I think Blake Griffin. He has negotiated all sorts of buyouts. So that was another thing in the middle of all this, is Russ firing his agent, presumably because his agent said, or was of the belief that he didn't need to be bought out, and Russ fired him. So that kind of gave you a sense of where Russ's thought process was on coming back to the Lakers. And then you hire Jeff Schwartz, and it becomes pretty clear that it doesn't seem like Russ wants to come back either. So I would say plan D, if the Lakers are entirely unable to move him at all. It seems like a buyout at this point of some sort. And so that would
which gets the Lakers no spending power.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That would be really tough, because to get absolutely nothing for him, I don't know. I think they would John Wall him before like going into the season, because he's still this expiring contract, and they would wait as long as possible to trade him, because getting absolutely nothing for him and buying him out is worst case scenario. And like you said, it gives them no spending power this year. They wouldn't even have enough cap space for a max offer next summer. So it really does the Lakers no good to get absolutely nothing for Russ. But nothing. I really don't know. Like, nothing about this has went according to plan in the year Russ has been a Laker. So maybe that's just destiny to have this play out into the season, and then you kind of add in that, as long as Russ is kind of around and the Lakers haven't done anything with him, is LeBron going to wait to sign an extension and create that distraction? So. As I was saying earlier, I don't think there's urgency right now on the Lakers, but that pressure is going to turn up real quick once the season gets underway. If Russ is still on the team and if LeBron hasn't signed an extension.
I lied. One last one, very quick though. Mm-hmm. On opening night in the year of our Lord 2022, Russell Westbrook. Let's actually make it more fun. Let's say he gets bought out by somebody. What team do you think is going to be like, we want us some Russ, baby?
So
I've thought about this and I don't have an answer.
I earnestly don't either. It's been a discussion we've kind of had, is what team would actually play Russell Westbrook? Because as we've said, like, if you're trading for Russ, you're trading for Russ as an expiring contract. You're not trading for any on-court production. And I kind of equate it to what Melo kind of had to go through. That's where, Melo had to sit out of the league for a year to come to the realization that he couldn't play the way he had always played. And Russ is as stubborn as they come when it comes to how he wants to play. And there is no sacrifice. There's no changing that. That's why I appreciate what Darvin Ham has said in his couple months as NBA head coach, but the idea that he's going to be the one to convince Russ to be this off-ball cutter that can play defense and commit to all that is great in theory, but in practice, he would be the nth coach, however many that have asked him to do that, asked Russ to do that, and it's never amounted to anything in the past. So I've kind of scoffed at that idea. Russ is going to be, Russ is Russ. Like it's literally the moniker, let Russ be Russ. And I don't think any team wants to let Russ be Russ in 2022. So, the idea of him coming off the bench is going to be a non-starter to him too, because it was a non-starter with the Lakers last season. Frank Vogel didn't bench him because he was afraid it would just be an entire lost cause. So he doesn't want to come off the bench. So I don't know if he's on a roster on opening night this upcoming season. I think there's going to have to be a little bit of a self-realization that you're not the player you once were, and you're going to have to kind of change some things up. Maybe an injury happens and there's a situation that comes available that Russ can step in and be something like himself. But the way he plays is it's just not efficient, and it's not what teams are looking for out of a point guard anymore. And he's this fascinating enigma that has some moments still. Like he still can be a really good player, but he has to do it in a specific type of way that he has no interest in doing. So it's a wild thought, but I would be a little surprised. I know OKC people like the reunion story of that, but they're not going to bring him in and put the ball in his hands over Shea or anything. So The only way that would work is if he's coming off the bench, but I don't think he would like that. So it would have to be some type of tanking team that
try to sell tickets.
Yeah, maybe Utah, depending on how much they blow things up, but Danny Ainge going along with that. So I really don't know that he's going to be on a team on opening night.
It's crazy. I can't disagree. It's nuts though. This was fun. Anything else anything I forgot about? Anything we didn't cover between these two storied franchises? One that has 17 championships and one that has not 17 championships. It's been a wild off season that, it's lasted forever, and somehow there's still another month and a half to go of this. So, and like we said, I don't know that anything's happening quickly. So I guess buckle up and buckle up
for a long ride, I guess.
Let's end with Andrew. Why don't you pop in and finish us up here?
Well, a question to put you on the spot. Predict what will happen. Is Kyrie on your team on opening night? Is Buddy Hield and Miles Turner on your team opening night? Is Julius Randle and or Cam Reddish and or Derrick Rose on your team opening night?
If I had to guess right now, I think I would still say Kyrie, because I do ultimately think that the Lakers would put a second first round pick in there. The report, the holdup had to do with the Lakers being kind of willing to do it, but then they wanted like Seth Curry back, and that one seems the furthest along in negotiation. So I would probably say Kyrie Irving would be the favorite, probably Buddy and Miles after that. I love Buddy. I love Miles. The idea of giving up 2 first round picks for them is a little tough to swallow, but I would say Kyrie's the favorite, then Buddy and Miles, then I don't know after that. There's any number of things. It could be some package from Utah. It could be some package from New York. There's a lot of things that could happen after that.
But you nailed it when you're like, it all comes back to KD. It all comes back to KD, and it all comes back to somebody. I agree with you. I think somebody needs to trade for Kevin Durant first. And I just,
I don't see that trade out there at all.
Boston?
They're the betting that I saw today. I'm sure you guys saw too. They're like better than even money right now. Yeah. If he gets traded. So
if you're Brooklyn, why are you not? I mean, we've John and I have talked about this at length on our Patreon pod. If the whole point of trading we're not trading Kevin Durant is that we don't want to lose this trade and we want somebody to build around, so we're not like ass afterwards, right? And you can get Jaylen Brown, who was just the second best player on a team that made the finals. You can get Robert Williams, who was a difference maker in most of those games. I don't know if they're giving up Robert That's Williams, the rumored trade.
I might have some hesitation if I was Boston on that.
So if I was Boston, I would be like, so it could be Kevin Durant and Marcus Smart. Okay,
Jacob, you doing Jaylen and Time Lord?
That is, I don't know that I could do hardly anything else if I was Boston than that, because that's a lot. But I would probably prefer doing Jaylen and Marcus Smart. But it's Kevin Durant, so ultimately I think I would do it. It would hurt a little bit more, but as a Lakers fan, I really do not want Kevin Durant on the Celtics. That worries me.
See, I shouldn't say.
John, we just went through an entire offseason before the Mitchell Robinson extension, where we were like, look at all these other centers that could just plug in place. And Time Lord's the difference maker in a Kevin Durant trade. No, I value what he does too. I'm just saying, like, we're getting Kevin Durant.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it would come down to me is like it's like tough to swallow, but ultimately you're getting a guy who, I mean, I think his game's going to age perfectly fine. So he's going to be able to contribute for a long time. And when he's healthy and playing, he's MVP level.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's no question about that. Well, we will continue to sit here with our popcorn and and watch from afar.
I have a question. For our Patreon, that's where we talk about non-Knicks stuff. We talk about outside the NBA stuff. And John just did his power rankings. Who, in your opinion, is currently the third best player on the Lakers? Because we were stumped.
It was Malik Monk, probably.
Right. So now, like, we went through the roster and we're like, whoa, hold on.
Lord, that is... I hadn't put a lot of thought into that.
Right.
That is, it's tough right now. I'm not sure what the answer would be. Wow.
So like we did a duos draft where it was like drafting the best duos in the NBA. You could double up and take like two from the same team. So you end up with like 4 players getting drafted, and AD and LeBron went 4th in the draft.
I took them, right?
You took them. So the top heaviness of the Lakers commands the respect of, they're not like a team that's going to finish in the lottery if they solve the Russell Westbrook problem. But I genuinely don't I tried to be like, who's the best player out of the Lakers? And it's almost confirming my suspicions about how much they need to do a Kyrie deal.
That's a good question.
A Lakers expert also doesn't know the third best player.
I mean, I'm looking at the roster and is
it Talen Horton-Tucker?
Yeah, that's Talen Horton-Tucker, or maybe a healthy Kendrick Nunn, who is just a complete mystery to Lakers fans right now after last season. Lord, I don't know. Yeah, that is a fascinating question, because that is not one that I had thought about yet this offseason.
There's a free article idea for you. Before I let you go, Jacob, just let the folks listening know where they could find you and your stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's just at Jacob Rude. Kept it real simple for you. And then, I do Silver Screen and Roll, writer over there, podcaster over there. And I mean, I do Locked On Hoosiers for Locked On Network. I don't think there's any Hoosiers on the Knicks right now.
Your head coach.
Yeah, I was about to say
Mike Woodson is the connection there. Yeah, Mike Woodson has been amazing at IU. We absolutely love him there. So, but outside of that, I mean, it's a pretty big connection, but I don't know if there's any others right now. But yeah, I host Locked On Hoosiers if you guys want to hear about how Mike Woodson's doing over at Indiana.
Listen, if you want to talk about a guy who has a pretty unanimous approval rating within the Knicks fan base, like there's just if you're someone connected with the Knicks, there's probably a segment of the Knicks fan base that doesn't like you. I don't know of anybody who doesn't like Mike Woodson. Mike Woodson's awesome.
Yeah, everybody at IU loves him right now too. So he just has great approval ratings everywhere right now.
There you go. Shout out to Woody. Jacob, you're the man. Thanks so much for coming on, bud.
Yep, I appreciate it.